What's up, everybody? Welcome to another top 10 list, but I'm doing something a little bit different now. I am not doing a movie related top 10 lists. Instead, I am doing my top 10 favorite cartoon shows. Yes, animated shows, cartoons, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I've been wanting to do this for a very long time because I love cartoons. I mean, of course, ever since I was a kid, but even now as an adult, I still love cartoons. I still do, whether they're kid cartoons I grew up with or adult cartoons that I watched as a teenager and still to this day. Just whatever the case may be, I love cartoons, and I thought I'd share my top 10 favorite cartoons of all time. And I also have honorable mentions as well. In fact, I have 10 honorable mentions, and really this could be a top 20 list, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to make a really long video. You know, with top 20, most likely it's going to be long because I talk a lot. So, and I mean, even top 10, this is most likely going to be at least 20 minutes long. So, yeah. But I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to talk about the honorable mentions. I'm just going to say what they are. There's one I will explain, but just because. But yeah, but if this was a top 20 list, what I would start with, like the first one I would say would be from number 11 all the way to number 20. But yeah, like the last one I'll say in the honorable mentions, that would be my number 20, and the first one I would say would be my number 11, just, you know, backwards. But in case you do want to hear what my top 20 is. But again, won't be talking about those. I'll just be talking about the top 10 after I talk about the honorable mention. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? So the honorable mentions, the 10 honorable mentions I have are Looney Tunes, the original, Adventure Time, Recess, Total Drama Island, which let me explain here. I know the show is actually called Total Drama, and you know they changed the title for each season, but I'm counting Total Drama Island because I don't like the others. I don't like Total Drama Action and whatnot, but I do like Total Drama Island. So yeah, Total Drama Island, Rugrats, American Dad. I actually don't have Family Guy. Sorry, I find that show to be a little overrated, but I do like American Dad. King of the Hill, Regular Show, The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, and Rocko's Modern Life. Yes, those are my 10 honorable mentions. I love them all. They're all great, but not quite on top 10 level for me. There are 10 others I like even more, and let's go ahead and talk about those, shall we? So, alright, so coming in at number 10, we have a classic, an all-time classic, right up there with Looney Tunes, like I mentioned a little bit ago. That is Tom and Jerry. Yes, and I'm counting the original Tom and Jerry, the Hanna-Barbera era. Yeah, from, I don't know when it started, 40s or 50s, something like that. But yeah, to, I want to say the 60s. That's the good era. They did have like some from the 70s and so on all the way, you know, to now, but not really into those. I like the original Tom and Jerry. It's just so good. Just hilarious slapstick humor, some really comedic cartoon violence that is just really funny too. Tom is a great character. He's definitely my favorite out of the two. I love them both, but Tom is definitely the funniest. He thinks he's going to get Jerry every time. This is, of course, a rivalry show about two rivals, a cat and a mouse. And Tom, the cat, Tom, he thinks he's going to get Jerry every time, but of course he never does. But he's just so funny. I love his scream. I love his laughs. I just love everything about him. And Jerry's great too. You know, he's really smart. Tom, not so much. I mean, he has some smart moments every now and again, but like even attempts to try to capture Jerry. It's smart, but it still doesn't work because Jerry still outsmarts him. But it's just a great cartoon. It's hilarious. I loved it ever since I was a little kid, and I still love it to this day. Tom and Jerry's great. It's like one of the best, maybe the best, like older cartoon that I love. I think that's probably it. Like the rest of these, I think are just like the oldest are like from the 90s, but Tom and Jerry though, great show. I love it, and that's my number 10. Okay, coming in at number 9, we have a cartoon that I did grow up with, but I grew up with as a teenager in middle school, to be specific. And this show was very popular in the 90s. I was born in the late 90s, in 98, and I was a teenager in the 2010s. The 2010s, I was a teenager. And this show did get rebooted in, I want to say 2011, and that's how I first saw it. That is Beavis and Butthead. Yeah, Beavis and Butthead, this is like the perfect show for a young teenager, for a, 13, 14-year-old. But even, I still love it, though. Is it dumb? Yes, but it's funny. It's really funny. I had King of the Hill in the honorable mentions, but I do like Beavis and Butthead better because it's just funnier to me. Mike Judge is great, though, and I do like King of the Hill, but Beavis and Butthead I do think is better. And just those two characters, they're just so dumb and horny, and yeah. And they fight a lot, too. It's just... Yeah, Butthead is actually my favorite out of the two. I like his laugh the most, and yeah, but they're both great. There's even some good side characters in the show as well, like the principal's really funny. I like what's his name, Mr. Van Riesen, the hippie teacher. You also got Stuart, the nerdy kid who always wants to hang out with Beavis and Butthead, but they don't like him all that much. And he has a Winger shirt while Beavis and Butthead have AC/DC and Metallica shirts. So that's pretty good. Todd as well, the bully. I also really like the gym teacher too. Buzzcut, I think is his name. He's really funny. But yeah, Beavis and Butthead's it's just great. It's really funny. It's dumb, but really funny. Really childish humor, or at least teenage humor. They always laugh at stuff, inappropriately. Whenever someone says like something sexual, they always laugh at it. Yeah. But yeah, Beavis and Butthead. Oh, I should mention the movie too, Beavis and Butthead, the original movie, Beavis and Butthead Do America, I think is even a little bit better than the original show. I should mention the 2011-2012 reboot, that was what I saw first. It's pretty good. It's not great, but it's alright. It's decent. I never really saw... I did see a couple episodes of the new show, of the new reboot. Wasn't a fan. But the one in 2011, 2012, that one was okay, but it definitely wasn't as good as the original show. And the movie is, in my opinion, even better. Also, one more thing I should mention, the music videos. Their commentary on music videos. This was on MTV, and there were, a bunch of bands back in the day that honestly got, if it wasn't for Beavis and Butthead, they might not have even been popular. Bands like Ween, Primus, stuff, just those kind of, weird bands, they might well not get at least as big if it wasn't for Beavis and Butthead, with them doing commentary on their music videos. And yeah, I don't think they're in the original archives whenever you watch the show, unfortunately, but you can find a lot of those music videos, those commentaries on YouTube. Just look up Beavis and Butthead music videos. You can find them on there, and they're really funny. But yeah, Beavis and Butthead, that great show, and that's my number 9. Okay, coming in at number 8, we have a Cartoon Network show that was actually my favorite whenever I was a little kid, and I think it's one of the most underrated Cartoon Network shows. I would say second after another one coming up, but also there's also a Adult Swim show I have even higher than that one. But but this is my second favorite Cartoon Network show. We'll get to my first in a minute. But my number 8, like I said, I loved this as a kid, and I watched it not well. I don't know. I watched it maybe last year or so, and it's still held up. That is Chowder. I don't have a DVD of it, but Chowder. Chowder is a really weird, but also just really funny cartoon that was on Cartoon Network in the late 2000s, and man, I was obsessed with this show. Much like Flapjack, which I had on my honorable mentions too, and that was a really good show too. That was really weird, even weirder actually than Chowder. But I always loved Chowder the most, and it was just great. The humor is just so very dumb, but it works with the show itself. Chowder, I don't know what he is. He's either like a rabbit or a cat or something like that. But he's this young apprentice to this chef named Mung Dul. And that's pretty much the show, is that they just try to cook stuff. And you also got Mung Dul's wife, Truffles, who was voiced by Tara Strong, a very famous voice actress, by the way. And also Snitchell. He's there too. He helps out too, and he was voiced by I believe he was voiced by the same guy. I can't remember his name, but the same guy who voices Jake on Adventure Time, also Bender from Futurama. But I believe that was him too, who voiced Snitchell. But yeah, and also Gazpacho. Gazpacho is a great character too. It's just a really funny show. I love it. I like the animation too, and they also have all kinds of different styles of animation. Like they have puppets and stop motion in with it as well and whatnot. It's really cool. But yeah, I love Chowder. Check it out if you haven't already. It should be on Max. I know it was. That was before they changed it to just Max. Whenever it's just HBO Max, but hopefully it should still be on there. But yeah, Chowder. I love it. That's my number 8. Okay, my number 7 is another underrated show, but this one's not really a kid's show. This was a show that was on Comedy Central, and it was pretty popular then. It was actually before South Park. And spoilers, we'll get to South Park in a minute. That's on here too, but we'll get to that. But I love this show though. It's very underrated. One of the most underrated cartoons, in my opinion. That is Dr. Katz, Professional Therapist. Yeah, you might not have heard this, maybe, if you didn't grow up with this or whatever. I mean, I didn't grow up with it, but I discovered it later. Actually, Cade discovered it first. My cousin, who does the Your Cousins Are Critics podcast with me, just in case you don't watch those. But he actually discovered it. In fact, this is the exact same DVD that he picked up at a Goodwill, and he never even heard of it. He just picked it up because it looked interesting, and he showed me the show, and I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. This is some funny shit, man. This is some really funny shit. It's kind of like awkward humor, but it works very well. The animation's not the best. It's very comic strippy kind of animation, and the characters don't really, and what's interesting about the animation is that the characters don't really move all that much except for their mouth and their eyes, but not even their hands. Sometimes their arms and hands might move a little bit, but not that much. It's very much like a comic strip, which is really cool, and the backgrounds are in black and white, but the characters are in color, which is really interesting. But I think what makes the show, for that kind of animation, which I do like because it's very unique, for a animated show, but it's not the best animation. But what makes the show good is the humor. The humor is just very. It's very like kind of almost like stand up comedy humor, but translated into a show, kind of like a sitcom, pretty much almost. But it works. The humor is it's really funny. You got Jonathan Katz playing Dr. Katz, and he's great. You also got H. John Benjamin, who you may know as Archer, the voice of Archer, and also Bob from Bob's Burgers. He voiced also the coach from Home Movies. I didn't have Home Movies in my honorable mentions. I should have maybe mentioned that, but that I do like Home Movies as well. And Bob's Burgers isn't bad either. I like that show a little, but H. John Benjamin voices his son Ben, who might be the best character in the show, and he's great. Also like what's her name, Lori or Laura, the secretary. She's really funny as well. But yeah, the humor, it's just very, I don't know how to explain it. Kind of sitcom-y, but a good sitcom. Like I would say maybe something like Everybody Loves Raymond, which I know some people don't like that show. I personally love that show, but it's a little similar to that. In fact, ironically, Ray Romano has guest starred in some episodes on the show. Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like, they have a bunch of guest stars that were like, stand-up comedians back then, and like you had Ray Romano, like I said. You also had Louis C.K. also guest starred, and so did Mark Maron and some others as well. And they're like playing as themselves, like as patients for Dr. Katz, which is pretty awesome, honestly. But I just love the stories that they tell. It's pretty much just stuff that they just come up with on the spot from their own, stand-up comedy, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, I love that about the show. But I also love Dr. Katz and his son Ben. Their chemistry is really funny and stuff. And Ben and Lori too. They're pretty good together. I think Ben has a crush on Lori or Laura, whatever her name is. But yeah, and she's not into him at all. But yeah, it's this is a great show. If you can find, I don't know if it's streaming anywhere, but if you can find this and you haven't seen it, please watch it. It is fantastic. It is really funny. I highly recommend it. Yeah, Dr. Katz, Professional Therapist. Let's see, what number was that? That was number 7. Yeah. Okay, coming in at number 6, and this might shock some people that have it very high up. And some people don't even like this show at all, and they don't understand why. Because I think this is a genius show. This is a very good show. This is my favorite Cartoon Network show, but ironically, I did not grow up with this show. Ironically, even though it is my favorite Cartoon Network show, and I did grow up with Cartoon Network, I didn't grow up with this. This came out whenever I was like in my, I want to say late teens, and I still did watch. Sometimes I would still watch like Cartoon Network every now and again, and I saw this on there. But yeah, my number 6 is Clarence. Yeah, Clarence is I think just a fantastic. It's a great cartoon. I don't have a DVD of it, unfortunately, but it's a great cartoon that was on Cartoon Network. I think it did okay for a little bit, but then it got canceled later on, unfortunately. It only had like 3 or 4 seasons, but it did okay. I think when it first started, it was kind of popular, but then it stopped pretty quickly, sadly. But I haven't seen every episode, but the first season especially is really good. It's really funny. Clarence, he's like this, he might be autistic. I don't know. If he isn't, I apologize, but I think he might be, and he's not like the brightest kid, really. But he's really funny character. He has 2 friends. You got Jeff, who's a really smart kid, and Sumo, who is actually voiced by Tom Kenny, who voices SpongeBob. But yeah, Sumo as well, who's kind of like a mix. Like, he has some really smart moments at times, but yeah, he's also kind of not too bright either. He does some dumb stuff as well. He just likes to have fun, but he also is kind of smart in some ways. But them three together are fantastic. They just make the three best friends. And this is, since I don't have the DVD, I will show a picture, but that's Clarence right there, just in case you never like seen or heard of this show. But yeah, that's Clarence. I pulled this from this website called the Top Tens, by the way. But yeah, great website, by the way. But yeah, you also got some characters, some other good characters like Chad, his stepdad, or his mom's boyfriend. His mom is kind of funny in the show too. Belson, who's not really a bully, but he is kind of a jerk kind of character in the show. But Clarence still is nice to him and stuff. But that's the thing, like, Clarence is like supposed to be like the nicest kid in the school too. He's nice to everybody. Like, it's kind of like SpongeBob and Squidward. Like, SpongeBob is still very nice to Squidward, even though Squidward doesn't really like SpongeBob. You know, that's kind of how Clarence and Belson are as well. More on SpongeBob later, but spoilers, yeah. But no, Clarence it's just great. And a lot of people I know, like my brother and sister-in-law who I live with, they've even seen the show and they liked it. I have a cousin who likes it as well. Cade, unfortunately, my cousin, you know, from Your Cousins Are Critics, I don't think he likes the show very much, unfortunately. At least he said he didn't like the animation style. I actually do. It's kind of, it's weird looking, but I like it though. I think it works pretty well with the humor and whatnot. But yeah, I love Clarence, and it's honestly my favorite Cartoon Network show. That's my number 6. Yeah, if you haven't seen Clarence, check it out. At least just a couple episodes. Just check it out. It's not for everybody, but I love it. Yeah, number 6 is Clarence. Okay, my number 5. Now we're in the top 5. My number 5 is my favorite Adult Swim show. It actually, I think, started out as a Cartoon Network show, but then it moved up to Adult Swim. But that would be my number 5, Space Ghost Coast to Coast, which I know, of course, the cover of this is in live action, but it actually is a cartoon that was based on a show in the 60s called Space Ghost, which I never actually seen. But Space Ghost Coast to Coast, it's mostly animated, but there's also some guest stars who are in live action as well. Like, this is a talk show hosted by Space Ghost, who was this superhero in the 60s. It's him and his two his two arch nemesis who actually help him out with the show. Zorak and Moltar. There's a picture of them right there. I just spoiled. You could probably see what the next one was if you looked up. But yeah, there's Space Ghost, Zorak, and Moltar. They help him out with the show too. So it's a talk show, and it actually does have real guest stars, and they're in live action form too. He has interviewed a shitload of guest stars, like everybody from Bjork to Beck to Mike Judge to Matt Groening to Hulk Hogan, even Weird Al, just everybody almost. Like almost everybody who was popular in the 90s has guest starred on Space Ghost Coast to Coast, and their reviews are fucking hilarious. And it's a very clever show. It's so good. It's hilarious. Like, the Space Ghost always asks them random ass questions to the guest stars, but I love it. And I love Zorak and Moltar as well. They always harass Space Ghost because they, actually hate him because they're his enemies, but they still help him out with the show. Like, Zorak is like the band leader. I think Zorak is like the Zorak is the band leader. Moltar is like the editor or something like that. But yeah, it's a great show. I love it. It's my favorite Adult Swim show, and that is my number 5, Space Ghost Coast to Coast. Okay, coming in at number 4. Now, for the longest time, I think ever since I was in high school, at least, but whenever I was in high school, I want to say starting with my junior year, this was my favorite, not only my favorite cartoon, but my favorite show of all time. Now it's moved down a little bit because I don't love every single season of this show, but this has been a show that's been around for a very long time, at least 20 odd years, In fact, it's even a year older than me. And I still love this show. Particularly, I love the early seasons the most. But my number 4 is South Park. Yeah. I know some people might like the later seasons more. I actually particularly like seasons 1 through 8. I think are my favorites. Even the first 3 seasons, which even the creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone they don't really like the early seasons that much themselves, and some of the fans don't either. I actually do love the early seasons, especially. I just think it's just really funny and very random humor, but I love it so much. I love random humor, especially for animation, like some of the shows I just mentioned, like Space Ghost, Dr. Katz. They have random humor, but I love it, and it works for South Park. Some of the later stuff I'm not too crazy about. I mean, they still had some good episodes here and there, but yeah, some of the later seasons I don't really care too much for. But the early seasons of South Park were fantastic. Especially on this DVD, which are seasons 1 through 5. Pretty much every single episode is just hilarious. But yeah. Yeah, just a great show. You got great characters in this. Of course, the 4 main boys, Cartman, Kenny, Stan, and Kyle. And you also got Butters, Mr. Garrison, who might be my favorite just because he's so offensive. Mr. Mackey, Chef. Chef was a great character. Unfortunately, he's not in the show anymore. But he was a great character. He also had, I'm looking at some of the characters on the back. Tweak, I really like. Officer Barbrady. I also like Kyle's brother Ike too. He's a great character. Just a great show with great characters. I forgot to mention, of course, Randy Marsh. That's a lot of people's favorite character. I do like Randy too. But South Park is just a great show, or at least early on, especially though it was really good. And of course it pushed a lot of boundaries. It caused a lot of controversial things and whatnot. But Trey and Matt, they just didn't give a fuck. And that's what I love about them. They're funny guys too. Just if you watch them in interviews and whatnot, they're really funny guys. I want to do a ranking of the movies that Trey Parker directed, like Team America and Orgasmo. But and I also want to see Basketball too, even though he didn't actually direct that one. But I do want to see Basketball. But yeah, those guys are just great. But yeah, South Park. I mean, it would be in my maybe my favorite. If it just ended on season 8 or so, if that was the last season, then it probably would be my favorite. But however, I like these other shows better because I don't love the later seasons. So yeah, South Park though, that is my number 4. All right, coming in at number 3. I have talked about the show quite a bit, I think, on my channel, or at least a few times. And you've probably seen me wear shirts of this show, although I'm not wearing a shirt of that in this one. I am wearing I am wearing a shirt to a show that I'll get to late in a minute, but yeah, I love this show. Ever since I was a kid. I mean, just kind of like South Park, the later seasons weren't great, but at least the first 3 seasons were just fantastic. And I even kind of have a soft spot for 4 and 5 as well, even though that came out after the first movie. But anyways, my number 3 favorite cartoon is SpongeBob SquarePants. Yeah. And I know there are some people that don't like this show. They might think it's annoying or whatever. But I grew up with this show. I was at the right age when this show was popular. When this show became popular, I was like 4 or 5 years old, and ever since then I just loved it. It came out a year after I was born in '99. I was born in '98, so I was at the right age, and me and Mike and Cade from Your Cousins Are Critics, we both grew up with this show. We both loved it, and yeah, it's just great. Great characters as well. SpongeBob, Patrick, of course. My favorite is actually Squidward. Squidward is a very relatable character, but like he's a lot of times he's very grouchy, but there's also some moments where he gets really crazy, and I kind of think he was influenced by a certain character of my number 1 show. We'll get to that later, but yeah, when it comes to like his craziness, I think he was influenced by that character. But you also got Sandy and Mr. Krabs, Plankton. Plankton's a great character. Mrs. Puff, Pearl, Larry the Lobster, Fred the My Leg guy, who I think is mostly just popular because of memes, because of him saying my leg. But yeah, but yeah, this show is just like I said, the early seasons, especially the first 3, were just spot on. Like, there's not a bad episode from any of those seasons. I mean, of course, I like some more than others, and like there are some that are kind of weak, but at least they're still funny. At least, like, there's even the weaker episodes in the early seasons were still funny. Like, they still had some funny moments for sure. But yeah, but this show, yeah, I love SpongeBob. I love the first movie too, from 2004. That is honestly, I want to say I ranked it at number 3 on my top 10 favorite animated films list. Check that one out if you haven't already. But I think I ranked that at number 3. Like, I love it that much. And I even have a soft spot for the second movie, Sponge Out of Water, which came around the time when the show wasn't good. But the movie itself, at least to me, wasn't that bad. Unfortunately, it does have a low score on Letterboxd, but I liked it though. Of course, I didn't like it as much as the first movie, and of course, even the early seasons of SpongeBob. But still, like, I thought it was decent. But yeah, SpongeBob is just a great show. It still holds up to this day. I still watch it every now and again, and the humor still works. Like, it's still hilarious. So yeah, SpongeBob SquarePants, that is my number 3. Like, it's really close to being my number 1 if I'm going to be honest, but there's 2 other shows I like better, and I do think they are better shows, but yeah. Alright, so my number 2 is another show that I grew up with. I grew up with this show. I think I started watching this show when I was like 8. Actually, no, it was a little younger, but then my mom told me I couldn't watch it yet because I was too young to watch it. But like at age 8, I think, age 8 or 9, something like that, I started watching it again, and I was completely obsessed with this show. I wanted like every merchandise of this show, and this is a very popular show. This is a show that most people would probably put in their top 10 favorite cartoons, animated shows. Some even at number 1, which I completely understand. I just personally like my number 1 better, but My number 2, however, is The Simpsons. Hopefully I won't get copyrighted for that, but but yeah, The Simpsons. I mean, what can I say about The Simpsons that hasn't been said already? It's the Beatles of animation, pretty much. Like, it was as popular as the Beatles were in the 60s. In the 90s, The Simpsons were everywhere. And for good reason, because it was a fantastic show. I know it's still going on, which I don't understand why, and I haven't seen like the latest seasons, but I did watch a little bit of the ones that were like in the 2010s, and I didn't really like it. But the 90s and a little bit of the 2000s, I kind of have a soft spot for like at least till like season. Well, shit, I don't know. Maybe like to like season 18 or something like that. I still didn't mind it. I still thought it was okay, at least like pretty decent, and some funny moments here and there. But in the 90s, like especially like the first 8 seasons, much like South Park, it was just great. It was a very, very good show. Really funny, and a shitload of iconic characters. I mean, of course, the main 5 Simpson family: Homer, Bart, Lisa, Marge, Maggie. But you also had Grandpa Simpson, who is actually my favorite Simpsons character. If I'm going to be honest, he just makes me laugh every time. And other iconic characters like Moe, Barney, Ralph Wiggum, Chief Wiggum, Groundskeeper Willie, Comic Book Guy, Krusty the Clown, Mr. Burns, Smithers, Ned Flanders. This is just a shitload, just a shitload of great iconic characters on the show, not just from the main family, but from from the supporting characters as well. And man, this show has also done everything that you can do, because it's been around for a very long time. But it's done pretty much everything. I love their parodies to movies too, and shows that they do. It's just fantastic. But yeah, this show, at least the early seasons, it was fantastic. It was just it's so iconic. It's The Simpsons. What more can I say? Yeah. Oh wow, this might be a 40-minute video. I apologize for that. Oh, alright, but we're almost done here. I just gotta talk about my number 1. But yeah, The Simpsons, that is my number 2. I'm gonna get a drink of water real quick. Alright. Now, my number 1 favorite animated show, cartoon. It would be The Simpsons, but I personally like this one better. My number 1 favorite cartoon of all time is Ren and Stimpy, or the Ren and Stimpy Show. And this might be a weird choice for some people. I know there are people that don't like this show because they might say it's too weird for them. I'm sorry, but I love weird stuff. I love weird movies. I love weird shows, cartoons especially. And this is the best weird cartoon ever made, without a doubt. Now, I wasn't around when this was popular, in the 90s. However, my brother was. My brother was around during that time. He would watch it all the time. And he was the one that showed me this show whenever I was young. And, I did. I actually watched this as a kid, but because of my brother showed me it. And I always really liked it because I always just loved the weird humor. I mean, sure, I liked SpongeBob and The Simpsons better during that time, but as years went on, I just learned to really appreciate the weirdness of this show and the humor and everything about this. it's just a very bizarre show, but I love it. You got, of course, the title characters, the two main characters, Ren Hoek and Stimpson J. Cat, who are Stimpy is a fat cat, and Ren is a chihuahua. Stimpy is not very bright. He's actually very stupid, if you will. An idiot, if you will. And Ren is a complete psycho. In fact, yes, this is the character I was talking about that I think was a big influence on Squidward and SpongeBob. And even, you could say, even the grouchiness and whatnot might have been influenced by Ren as well, just because Stimpy annoys Ren too. But when Ren gets really crazy, it's very similar to how Squidward gets crazy in SpongeBob. I actually prefer Ren's craziness a little more, but they're still great though. Squidward is still great when he gets crazy, but when he goes insane. But I just love Ren's. I just love it when Ren is a psycho. When I was a kid, I liked Stimpy better, but now I like Ren a little bit better just because he's so psychotic. And there's a few other characters too that are pretty good. You got Mr. Horse. No, sir, I don't like it. You also got Muddy Mud Skipper and Powder Toast Man. Yeah, Powder Toast Man. I also like the Fire Marshal too. I headed under here with the likes of you people. And who else? George Liquor was a weird character. I think a lot of people didn't like him. I kind of do. He's kind of funny. What's it? Haggis McHaggis as well. It's just a weird, bizarre show. It's just very strange. There's some gross out humor. There's just some weirdness and random stuff, but it's just iconic. It's funny as hell. I also just love the animation style and even just some of the drawings. Like, there's some really funny drawings in the show of, like, the characters. Like, they'll make some really funny looking faces and stuff, and I just love it. This is just my show. This is my kind of humor, my kind of, especially for animated shows, this is my kind of humor, and I love Ren and Stimpy. I know they rebooted it in 2003, and I heard it was pretty awful, honestly. Like, they made it more edgy and, like, for adults more, which, I don't know, you can make an argument whether or not this was a kid's show or not. I mean, it was on Nickelodeon, but there's some humor in it that wasn't really for kids, and also, even the weirdness might not be for kids. Like, parents would think it's just too weird for kids to watch, you know. But yeah, and this show has influenced so many other shows. I mean, SpongeBob was very much influenced on this show, and even some of the others I mentioned earlier, like I would say like Chowder was in it. That was influenced by Ren Stimpy as well, but yeah, Flapjack as well, which I had in my honorable mentions, but this is just a very bizarre show, and I fucking love Ren and Stimpy. One more thing I will mention, there are some people that like grew up on the show but still might not watch it anymore because of the creator John K, because he's a pretty controversial person, much like how a lot of people won't watch Fat Albert because of Bill Cosby, which that I understand, but yeah, I don't like John K as a person. I don't. But I will admit that he did make a great show. He is good as an artist. That's all I'm going to say about him. But yeah, that doesn't really ruin my enjoyment of the show. It really doesn't. Like, since I watched the Ren Stimpy documentary, which I did talk about in one of my monthly rankings, but ever since I watched that, I went back to the show. I'm like, no, this show is still good. I don't care. So, yeah. It doesn't take a lot for me to, like, not watch a show anymore because of like who was involved and stuff. I mean, I still like Kevin Spacey as an actor, even though he's a very controversial person too, but I do like him as an actor and I'll still watch his movies. So yeah. But yeah, Ren and Stimpy is, I love it. I love Ren and Stimpy, the Ren and Stimpy show, and that is my number one favorite cartoon of all time. Alright, so there it is, my top 10 favorite cartoons of all time. This was much longer than I thought it was going to be. I apologize, but if you did make it this far, thank you very much. So in the comments, please give me your favorite, your top 10 favorite animated shows, cartoons of all time. Yeah, give me your top 10. And, yeah, please like, subscribe, comment, and hit the bell. And I'll see you later. Alright. Peace.